At 87, country music icon Bill Anderson has lived through eras, legends, and losses. But behind the hits and the headlines lies one chilling memory he's kept buried, until now. For the first time, Anderson is revealing the truth about a fateful moment that forever tied him to a man whose name still echoes through the heart of country music, Hank Williams Sr. This isn't just a story, it's a haunting confession, one that's been weighing on Anderson's soul for over 60 years. What really happened between these two giants? And why has Anderson waited a lifetime to tell us? The answers will leave you speechless. In a revelation that has stunned even longtime fans, Bill Anderson finally shares a message from Hank Williams Sr., a message so profound it nearly made him walk away from music forever. For decades, there's been a quiet pause in Bill's voice whenever Hank's name came up. A shadow that lingered behind his tributes. Now, the silence is broken. And what's emerging is a truth no one saw coming, a truth wrapped in a warning, a wound, and a mystery Bill has carried deep within him his entire life. Bill Anderson, lovingly known as Whispering Bill, was born in the stillness of South Carolina on November 1, 1937. Before the spotlight of Nashville crowned him one of the most revered voices in country music, Bill was just a soft-spoken dreamer, carefully weighing every word like it mattered, because to him, it did. His voice didn't need to belt. It drifted, like a gentle wind through open fields, subtle, steady, unforgettable. His songs weren't just written, they were lived. Stories of heartache, memory, and grace. But long before the awards and acclaim, Bill was just a college kid scribbling poems between lectures at the University of Georgia, unaware that his quiet gift would one day echo across generations. Bill Anderson never set out to become a country legend. His first dream was simpler, he wanted to be a sports writer. But destiny had other plans. A broken heart, a worn-out guitar, and a restless soul pulled him down a different road. In the late 1950s, he poured that ache into City Lights, a haunting ballad soaked in loneliness and neon. When Ray Price recorded it, the song didn't just climb the charts, it detonated, shooting straight to #1 and announcing Bill's arrival in the music world. With just one hit and a burning fire in his chest, Bill packed his dreams and moved to Nashville. But what he found wasn't just opportunity, it was a city echoing with pressure, shadows, and the ghosts of giants. The deeper he stepped into the heart of country music, the more he realized the stage was haunted. At the Opry, legends drifted in and out like whispers on the wind, Lefty, Patsy, Hank. Everyone chasing something they could never seem to hold, peace, purpose, escape. Bill once admitted it felt like standing in a thunderstorm, every voice around him so powerful it could split the sky. And looming over it all was the darkest figure of them all, Hank Williams Sr., a man whose talent was only rivaled by the storm that followed him, and whose words to Bill would leave a scar that never healed. By the time Bill Anderson set foot in Nashville, Hank Williams Sr. was already gone, but his shadow never left. Hank's name lingered in every hallway, every honky-tonk, like smoke that refused to clear. People didn't speak of him with reverence, they spoke with unease, as if the man's ghost still haunted every stage he once stood on. Tales of his rage, his demons, and his chilling foresight echoed behind closed doors. One story in particular burned its way through the industry. Hank once stared a young singer in the eye and said coldly, "You won't last. This place will eat you." That sentence haunted Bill. It wasn't just a legend, it was a warning. And then one night, it wasn't a story anymore. Someone looked Bill in the eye and said the same exact thing. "You won't last. This place will eat you." The moment hit him like a freight train. It shook the foundation of everything he believed. From that point forward, Hank's legacy became more than just a myth, it became a burden Bill carried in silence. Because the real mystery surrounding Hank Williams Sr. wasn't just about how he died, it was about the curse he left behind. And for Bill Anderson, that curse never let go. Every story, the backseat deaths, the breakdowns, the benders, had been told to Bill. But he didn't feel Hank's presence in his bones until he entered the Ryman Auditorium. The smell of old whiskey and dashed hopes was still there on the Opie stage. Additionally, it seemed as though Hank's chair backstage had never been empty. Hank had cursed it, according to some. He never really departed, according to others. However, Bill felt that the truth was more significant than any myth. Bill revealed a terrifying tale that never made the news in a 1961 radio interview that was little heard and largely forgotten. One night at the deserted Opry Hall, he was practicing by himself. Except for his own echo, the rafters are silent. The lights on the stage flickered as he started to strum. The speakers crackled with faint static. Then a sentence whispered from the darkness, as clear as the notes he was playing. "If you don't live it, don't sing it." Bill pivoted. There is no one there. He put it down to exhaustion until the next week. The whisper went on this time to say, "That's what killed me." He kept it to himself. Not initially. Nashville was a city that preyed on the weak. You were eaten if you displayed weakness. However, Bill described having recurrent dreams in which he sat with Hank Sr. in a smoky bar booth in his diaries, which his family recently made public. As the discourse grew more gloomy, Hank would lean in, his eyes empty, and remark something like, "You know too much." Alternatively, "Tell him what I did." However, only when they're prepared. These weren't merely fantasies. They turned into obsessions. Bill started penning songs that seemed to convey a message. Still the focal point of my life, Mama's song was filled with spiritual ambiguity, longing, and the burden of invisible things. He was referred to as a sentimentalist by certain supporters. Some claimed that his voice was the saddest in country music. However, his loved ones were aware that Bill was channeling someone or something. Bill was not happy with his position among the Opry elite, even though he had earned it by the middle of the 1960s. His marriage was failing. He was becoming disconnected from his children. Isolation accompanied the arrival of money. He would write verses that he never showed anyone while spending late nights at the studio by himself with his instrument and his thoughts. "Every time I sing, it feels like Hank's watching me from the balcony," he once said to a producer. And since they all sensed it, no one laughed. Bill Anderson carried something else, but Hank Sr.'s mystique was still alive. A secret, a weight. Decades would pass before he eventually disclosed what Hank had done to him and the reason he never fully healed. Bill Anderson's personal life didn't abruptly fall apart in the late 1960s and early 1970s. It was unpleasant, slow, and almost imperceptible to the outside world. Like a man unaffected by either, he continued to murmur Bill, the quiet Southern poet, as he crunched lines about love and grief on stage. However, his marriage was disintegrating behind closed doors. B, his wife, had long been tired of the late nights, odd phone calls, and Bill's increasing emotional detachment that came with the job. One of her close friends heard her say, "He's chasing ghosts, not dreams, and they won't let him love the living." Bill stayed at the Grand Ole Opry more often than he did at home. Later, his kids would claim that they only saw their father on TV and rarely otherwise. Millions were reassured by the silky voice, but it never fully returned to the dinner table. The divorce was subtle yet heartbreaking when it finally happened. Those close to Bill remarked that, aside from perhaps the guilt he harbored over Hank, it destroyed him more than anything else. Bill never publicly reacted negatively or caused a scandal. Because Bill was getting anonymous, typewritten, mailed letters from Alabama that were always signed with AH during all of this. There was no danger in the letters. They served as prompts. Phrases like, "It ain't over, Bill," or "You owe me a story." When a woman in her 70s approached him backstage with a manila package during a 1974 performance in Montgomery, he initially believed it to be a mean prank. "This belonged to Hank," she said. He wanted the perfect person to receive it. 3 pages were handwritten within. Hank's last song, which was never put on tape. After reading it once, Bill put it away for several years. The lyrics were eerie. They mentioned a young poet I cursed before I died, spiritual debt, and betrayal. Bill's music evolved, but he kept it to himself and his bandmates. In a rare 1985 interview, he stated that occasionally, "I write songs I don't remember writing, like someone else pushed the pen." He released a song about mortality, regret, and missed opportunities. "When you leave that way, you can never go back," that same year. It was aired on country radio. Though few knew it was based on the words from Hank's Lost Pages, fans adored it. Bill was still doing very well financially. He earned money from a variety of sources, including tours, TV appearances, and song royalties. But he was falling apart emotionally. At one point, an Opry buddy said, Bill had everything. Despite his fame, wealth, and admiration, he appeared to be waiting for someone or something. In the woods outside of Murrysboro, Tennessee, he purchased a cabin. Quiet, alone. No one ever saw guests, but neighbors said they heard music late at night. There were rumors that he was finally going insane. Actually, though, Bill was getting ready for something no one could exactly put into words. This was all he ever said to people. "I'll tell the world what actually occurred with Hank one day, but not until I'm old enough to be taken seriously." Decades have yet to pass before that day. But Bill was no longer only dreaming about Hank Williams Sr.'s ghost. It was becoming louder and had taken root in his real existence. Even celebrity couldn't protect Bill Anderson from the storms that had swept through his life by the late 1990s. Once writing love songs as soft as raindrops, the guy now had to deal with the kind of heartbreak that is impossible to escape via poetry. After a protracted fight with cancer, his wife Betty, who had supported him during his lean years and gold records, died in 1997. Their marriage had lasted for 44 years. Bill was emptied out, not just broken, by losing her. It took Bill over 2 years to return to the studio after the funeral. According to friends, he paced the hallways of his Murrysboro home like a man torn between two worlds most of the time. Dust accumulated on his piano. He kept his journals closed. The mansion turned into a mausoleum of silence after being a place of song and laughter. He was never the same. It was later disclosed by a close friend that, you could see it in his eyes, like he was carrying more than just grief. Perhaps he was, since Bill started discussing Hank once more during those quiet years, not in interviews, but rather in whispers to individuals he trusted. He would bring up a letter that Hank Williams, Sr., had written to him decades before. It was ancient, yellowed, and stashed away in a locked vault. Nobody else had ever seen the letter. Bill said that he occasionally read aloud from a letter in the middle of the night, akin to performing an incomprehensible prayer. He was grieving when an odd occurrence occurred. Bill resumed writing, but this time the tunes were more somber, gloomy, and even eerie. Songs like "Too Country" and "The Corner of My Life" have more than just lyrics. Confessions were made. At one point, he even acknowledged that some of the phrases didn't seem to be his own. In a rare interview in 1999, Bill remarked, "It's like Hank was leaning over my shoulder." That wasn't all, though. Rumor had it that Bill would come to Montgomery late at night, lay flowers on Hank's grave in silence, and spend hours by himself. Locals claimed to have witnessed him conversing and occasionally making gestures as though he were debating with an absent party. Early in the new millennium, Bill's career started to improve. He demonstrated that his brilliance had not diminished by writing songs for Kenny Chzn, Brad Paisley, and others. However, according to those closest to him, the brightness in his eyes never entirely returned. It included the pain of losing his wife. However, Hank's secret and the weight of that letter were like a chain that Bill had to bear. And now, at the age of 87, decades later, Bill Anderson has made the decision to speak up. Because Hank's letter did more than merely compliment Bill's skills. It contained a confession and a warning that would completely change fans' perceptions of the king of country music. What did Hank Williams Sr. provide Bill Anderson in that letter? Bill kept it hidden for almost 70 years. "I never told the media about it. It was never mentioned in a biography. He never once brought it up in his lectures on songwriting." However, people close to Bill always said that he occasionally pulled it out when he was unable to fall asleep or after drinking too much. With shaky hands, he had read it out loud before returning it, as if it were a cursed relic, to the fireproof box beneath his bed. Shortly after turning 87, Anderson finally spoke up about the letter. He didn't do it in a candid memoir or on a podcast. During a quiet fan Q&A in the backstage room of the Grand Ole Opry, he made reference to it. "What's the most personal thing Hank Williams ever said to you?" someone had inquired. After a moment of silence, Bill added, "He told me not to follow his path, that I'd end up haunted." People believed it to be a lyrical metaphor and laughed uneasily. Bill, however, did not smile. He continued. "He claimed to have noticed something hazardous in me, that I was too good at writing agony. He warned me that I would never return if I leaned too much into that area." Bill then acknowledged that Hank had revealed something more sinister in that letter, that he didn't think he would live past 30 and that the demons he had enshrined in his music were beginning to haunt him in real life. "My body hasn't figured it out yet, and I feel like I'm already dead," he wrote. Bill claimed that when he received that letter, he was just 23. It didn't make sense to him at the time, but as time went on, it did. Bill said the letter also mentioned a night in 1951 when Hank thought he saw a shadow man standing in his dressing room following a performance in Kentucky. Not a fan, not a stage hand. Another stuff. The person, according to Hank, was tall, hatless, and had unblinking eyes. The letter said that he remained silent. He merely gave a nod. "I thought I was being told I was finished." Whether real or imagined, that one incident influenced the remainder of Hank's decline. But it wasn't the ghost story that made Bill cling so tenaciously to the letter. It was the last sentence. "Please don't write me back if you read this. Just keep me in mind before the darkness encroached." Bill claimed to have retained the letter even though he never responded. He has also vowed to have seen that shadow man over the years. It happened 3 times. Being grounded was something that Bill Anderson always took pride in. Unlike the other guys of his generation who poured liquor into their cereal bowls or burned hotel rooms, he was not a crazy man. He was the cool guy, the country music gentleman. However, he acknowledges that one night in 1988, something broke. Only a few months had gone after his wife's death. Cancer is harsh and swift. The house felt empty without her, even after decades of marriage. There was more than simply calm in the corridors. Empty frames, partially folded laundry, and her perfume that seemed to be lingering in the closet as if she hadn't quite departed were all accusations. Even with sleeping tablets, he was unable to fall asleep that night. Sorting through old fan letters and lyrics, he sat at the kitchen table. At that point, he discovered it once more. Hank's name scrolled in blue ink on the envelope. He opened it for the first time in years. When Bill read it again, the words struck him in a new way. Hank seems to have written them specifically for this time. Hollow, grieving, and terrified of being engulfed by the dark. He was now chilled by the bit about being pursued by something otherworldly. It finally made sense, not because it sounded strange. After putting the letter down, he entered his living room. Then he noticed it. A tall person stood close to the fireplace, just past the rim of the light. Still, no blinking, no headgear. Bill stopped. His heartbeat quickened. He wanted to shout but was unable to do so. He had a locked throat. Bill claimed that although the figure remained motionless and silent, he sensed a warning or a recognition passing between them. Then it vanished. Just gone, no flash, no noise. He kept it a secret for years. Would anyone believe it? However, Bill's songwriting changed after that evening. He began writing more about ghosts, loss, and how the past may resurface unexpectedly. He had entered his haunted age, according to critics. What they did not realize is he wasn't just writing metaphor, he was writing what he noticed. Inside the years that accompanied that chilling encounter, Bill Anderson's song took on a softer, eerier tone. Enthusiasts noticed it without delay. Songs like Nonetheless and As Soon as an Afternoon had been already steeped in despair, however his later catalog carried a deeper ache, like he become talking through a veil. Friends stated he had come to be more withdrawn, almost like he turned into constantly listening for something the rest of them could not pay attention. At the back of closed doors, Invoice started out accumulating matters. Antique tapes, Hank's senior memorabilia, handwritten lyrics, whatever that tethered him to that era of legends who have been slowly disappearing. He wasn't hoarding for reputation or resale fee. He changed into chasing something, a connection, a thread to the other facet. He informed a near pal as soon as, "I do not think Hank's accomplished speaking. I suppose he has just been looking ahead to the proper ears." By using 2011, Bill had converted his basement right into a form of shrine. Now not a flashy museum, something more non-public. The centerpiece turned into a battered radio from the 1940s that he claimed nevertheless picked up a peculiar static sign at 3:17 a.m. each Friday. No voices, just faint guitar notes and what he defined as the sound of shoes on gravel. Whenever it played, he'd sit there silently like he become waiting for Hank to complete a notion he'd started out in that letter many years in advance. Humans near him concerned. His son Jamie as soon as requested, "Dad, do you think you're slipping?" Invoice simply smiled and said, "Slipping? No, I assume I am tuning in." Then in 2017, something came about that rattled even Bill. Throughout a ordinary cleaning, his housekeeper found an envelope wedged in the back of the piano, one Invoice swore he had never seen before. Internal become a faded photograph of Invoice and Hank Williams taken behind the scenes in 1952. Except Invoice does not don't forget ever taking that picture. He'd only met Hank once briefly in 1951. He turned into sure of it. However there they have been within the image side by way of facet guffawing. And on the lower back in Hank's unmistakable handwriting for Bill, while it begins making feel, "Do not run." Invoice sat with that picture for hours. He did not sleep that night time and for the primary time in a long time, he felt afraid. In 2023, a quiet rumor began circulating amongst us of a track insiders. It wasn't in the tabloids. It wasn't even online at first. It started out behind the curtain in green rooms, whispered among getting old session players and long-time manufacturers, individuals who'd been within the enterprise for the reason that 50s. The rumor that Invoice Anderson became preparing to release something, now not a track, not an album, something else, something he'd been holding on to for over half a century. It turned into called the Hank tapes. No one knew what changed into on them, best that they had been recorded sometime in the 70s after Invoice had all started his obsession with Hank Williams's legacy. Some stated it turned into simply rambling demo recordings, a tribute album Invoice by no means finished. Others swore it changed into greater than that. One person, a valid engineer who as soon as worked on Invoice's early periods, claimed the tapes have been no longer tune, however reminiscences. He stated Invoice had captured something unusual on them. No longer lyrics, no longer guitar, however a presence. As buzz grew, Bill stayed silent till one night in December, he walked onto the Grand Antique Opry level and paused longer than traditional earlier than speaking. "If you've ever heard a ghost whisper for your ear," he said, voice trembling, "you may realize what those subsequent songs suggest." Then he performed a fixed of by no means earlier than heard ballads, songs that sounded historic and present-day unexpectedly. Enthusiasts wept. One elderly Target Market member collapsed in tears and had to be helped out. Something turned into extraordinary. The music felt haunted, find it irresistible wasn't just coming from Invoice, but through him. Backstage after the display, a reporter requested him if the Hank tapes had been real. Invoice failed to blink. He simply said they had been never mine to start with. Weeks later, Invoice introduced his retirement from public life. He retreated to his home simply outdoor of Nashville, the equal home wherein the basement nonetheless held the dusty radio, the framed photograph of Hank, and an old briefcase that no person had ever seen him open. Then, in a quiet social media post on his birthday, Invoice shared an unmarried sentence. "A few songs aren't written, they're remembered." The post went viral. United States stars, old and young, began sharing their memories about Bill. How he'd mentored them, guided them, even warned them at times. "Listen cautiously while the room gets quiet," he used to say. It is in which the truth lives. Nowadays, at 87, Invoice Anderson doesn't give many interviews, however humans still communicate about him like he is part of a few vintage magic, a living conduit among then and now. A person who saw something all the one's years in the past in Hank Williams and in no way stopped listening for it. And something he heard, he took it with.